Hi everybody. I hope you're doing really well. It's great to see you again. Anyway, this week I'd like to talk about a question I am often asked. What's the best choice of a computer for the older hobbyist photographer? Wow, talk about a loaded question. Does being older imply a lot or a little experience with technology? Does being older imply an infinite budget or something more constrained? And most important of all, does being older mean that the solution has to be easy to use? Well, the answer is yes to all of these, of course. I first touched a computer of any sort in 1978. It was a dumb terminal with black screen and green lettering. It linked back to what was called then a mainframe computer. Do they even make those anymore? At any rate, I was deathly afraid of it when I first saw it. One wrong text command and I was sure I would crash the entire system and bring my company to a grinding halt. Of course, I never did, and I never could do that with all of the security precautions available even back then. I finally got my hands on what was called a personal computer in 1983. It had no RAM, no hard drive. It ran off two floppy disks. Haha, I bet you don't know, at least most of you don't know what those are, but maybe you do. One was for the program and one was for the data that you either brought to the computer or created while you were using it. When you shut it down, the computer emptied completely. Nothing was left behind. You had to reboot it all again and reload everything the next time. I've worked with computers throughout my working life, and I've become very comfortable with them. My naturally geeky and analytical mind appreciates the logic, well, mostly the logic, of how these computers operate. I now have 3 computers in my possession: a Windows 11 Tower, a Mac, an M1, I should say an M1 Mac Mini, and an M1 MacBook Air. Don't worry if you don't know what those are. I'll talk about them a little bit more in a minute. What's that old expression? You've come a long way, baby? Well, I think I'm living proof of that. Each of these computers serves a specific purpose that I can briefly summarize this way. My Windows computer is for photo organizing and photo editing, also for other general applications like Zoom, email, accounting, preparing presentations that I might be giving, etc. My Mac Mini is strictly for video recording, my talking head stuff, as you're seeing right now, and for video editing. My MacBook Air is for travel and for any live presentations that I have to give while away from the studio. So how does this help you? And don't worry, I can already hear you saying, who the heck is going to invest in 3 computers? How is that useful or efficient? Well, I'll admit out of the gate that my setup isn't really efficient. Working on 3 machines today really doesn't make any sense. You can find one computer that will handle everything that I use computers for. And I fully expect that someday in the not too distant future, I will look at consolidating all of my own needs into one computer. Well, maybe 2. Let me explain. I looked at all the things that I wanted to be able to do with my computer, and I found it somewhat tricky a few years ago to get everything in one machine. If I wanted power and performance, I had to sacrifice size and weight. If I wanted portability, I had to sacrifice performance and storage space. I'm delighted to report that those situations are slowly changing, and like many other things in electronics today, what used to be separate needs are slowly converging into relatively simple solutions all in one. That said, it's still important to take some time to understand what you want to use the computer for, and use that as the first step down the road towards making the right choice for you. It's interesting that most people that I've helped make their choice don't do that and just select a machine based on price, maybe even only looking at what's on sale, or maybe even what your friend has put up for sale as a used product. So let me describe some of the questions that you should ask yourself when thinking about your next computer. Out of the gate, Windows or Apple, or maybe even some third-party option. But don't base this decision on price. Instead, base it on what you are comfortable and familiar with. As an older computer user, it's a big deal to learn something completely new. Instead, start off ahead of the game by using what you're already familiar with. The capabilities of all platforms are sophisticated enough now to let you choose either of the big players without sacrificing anything that you might want in terms of performance or capability. Second, what do you want to do with your computer? If you're watching this channel, then I assume you're interested in photography and media. Do you want to store and manage those assets? How many of those assets do you have? Storing and managing email and documents is very different from storing and managing images, video, audio. If you're doing the latter, then the quality of your monitor is also important. The power of your graphics card is important, and the amount of storage space and what kind of storage space you have is also important. How many other things do you want to plug into your computer is question number 3. Will you use it to listen to music? Will you use it to connect with people online using Zoom? Or to allow family members or grandkids even to use it to play games? If so, then decisions about the number and type of attachment points or ports that you get with the computer are also very important, and selecting good quality peripheral gear becomes equally important as well. Next, will you be traveling with your computer is question number 4. Photographers need a way to safeguard and manage their photographs while traveling. That doesn't mean that you have to view everything while on the road, just that you have to have a well-defined workflow to ensure that your photographs are safely stored and that you can identify them easily once you get back home. The process that I use, the full process that I use, will be the subject of a future video. But for our purposes today, if you are traveling with your computer, then the size and weight of that computer definitely comes into play, along with how much storage you're going to have available in that machine. Maybe you are willing to sacrifice a bit of that power for more portability. Definitely a trade-off to be made there. And lastly, of course, question number 5 is, what is my budget? Of course this comes into play, but you note that I've made it the last consideration, not the first. Okay, with those questions in mind, I'll spend just a couple of minutes now talking about 2 of the computers that I have and why I made the choices that I made. Again, I'm not peddling any product here, and I'm not sponsored or supported in any way by any of the manufacturers that I might mention. Everything I have was paid for at full retail cost by me. By the way, I'll do the plug right now, the one and only plug that I will do. This is a great time, if you like what you see so far, and if you like my other videos, to maybe like and subscribe to my channel, like this video in particular, and get more content like this in the future. I would really appreciate it. All right, first up is my Windows Tower, built in 2019, now running Windows 11. By the way, if you go to your local computer store, and I don't mean a big box store, but an actual computer store, and talk to the technicians there, they can often suggest the individual components that you should include to achieve what you want to achieve with the computer. Just tell them exactly what you want to be able to do, and they will actually custom build a machine to your needs. That's what I did when I got my Windows computer, and that's the biggest advantage of Windows, I think, that you can fully customize your box with just the stuff that you really need and leave aside or leave out the stuff that you don't. I wanted to be able to import and organize photos, to view and cull them quickly, to edit them, to output them to a variety of places, and ultimately to store the finished versions of those photographs. To do that, I ended up with a tower, not at all portable, that included, at the time, a very fast processor, a very fast graphics card, and almost fully topped up RAM memory. Budget did come into play to limit how topped up these could be, but I was delighted what I could get for my budget. But the most unique feature in my tower computer design is the 3 hard drives that are included in my box. Say what? You say? 3 hard drives? Yes, and each was the best choice of function and price at the time. Let me explain again. The first of these is a new type of hard drive on a stick that I had never heard of before. Solid state, it is extremely fast, and it is called an NVMe M.2 drive. What the name is that? What kind of a name is that? It has no moving parts. It's used for my operating system and my programs. Anything resource intensive, like Lightroom or Photoshop. They run as smoothly as butter. But these drives are very expensive, and I purchased one that I could afford with only 256 gigabytes of space. There was no way that it alone could serve all of my needs for my computer. Next is what's called my working hard drive, where all the newest photos are imported, sorted, culled, and edited. This is also a drive on a stick, solid state as well, but much slower and much larger than the drive for my programs. This one is 2 terabytes in size. Even so, it cost far less than the first drive. The two of them pair together perfectly to give me great performance. Last is my storage hard drive, which is a traditional high-volume 6 terabyte spinning platter hard drive, where all of my finished work is stored when done. I could have made this an external drive actually, but there was no reason to. Everything fits nicely and is stored nicely in the same box. All of this functionality is paired with a 32-inch 4K full Adobe RGB compliant monitor to give me the most amazing image quality I've ever seen and the most amazing color rendition. But none of this leaves my studio. It, of course, is way too big to carry. So the flip side is my travel computer, the M1 MacBook Air. It is 12 inches wide, 9 inches tall, and less than half an inch thick. It weighs less than 3 pounds and easily fits into almost any bag. I decided to max out the storage of that machine so that I wouldn't have to carry a separate hard drive. Although I still face the challenge of having to transfer everything off the computer once I get back to the studio after a trip. Some of you might argue that this would be easier to do with a separate hard drive. Well, yeah, possibly so. Despite its size, it can run the same Lightroom and Photoshop that my Windows Tower handles so well. And its display is superb, detailed and bright, something that Apple calls a Retina display. But it has limited configuration options. Essentially, there are 2 models or 2 combinations of speed and storage. It's perfect for working in a hotel room, on a deck, in an airport. The battery is amazing and lasts 15 hours without a charge. As mentioned, I bought this when I realized that my travel workflow was sadly lacking. I often returned to the studio unable to remember what photograph went with what part of my trip. So now, each evening when traveling, I spend time writing a journal of that day's adventures, and then I download, rename, and organize all of the photographs taken that day to match up with that journal entry. It's the only way I've found that I can keep things straight. It serves my old brain and my old girl memory very well. And budget was a factor here too, although some of you will argue that I could have done much better with a Windows laptop than an Apple laptop. Maybe true, but I didn't find that there was anything this small and light with this much capability and power when I went looking. But this machine does have its limits, particularly for displaying information that my old eyes can see well. The display is beautiful, but each image is somewhat tiny in comparison to my beast of a display at the studio. So for many of you, this laptop could indeed serve as the only computer that you need to own. But because of my visual limitations, I really do need to have something more. So there you have it. Hopefully this has given you some food for thought for your next purchase. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, and I'd be happy to read any comments that you might like to offer me about the choices that I've made and what you think of them. So please leave them in the comments below. And If you could like this video, that would really help me out, and please, if you could, subscribe to my channel for more content like this going forward. I would really love to put out more to help the older photographer. Thank you, and see you again very soon.